Join me as we learn together Chumash for today, Friday, the 6th Torah reading of Parshas Beshalach. Chapter 16, verse 11. Yesterday the Jewish people were told, after complaining about that they had no food, as they finished all their provisions that they took out with them out of Egypt, they complained to the Jewish, complaining to God that they had no food and complaining to Moshe and Aaron, where God then tells Moshe and Aaron about the food that will be coming from heaven, the manna from heaven, as well as the meat. Today we continue with the Torah reading telling us about the gift that the Jewish people were given for the 40 years that they were in the desert, that they had the manna to eat for them, and what the laws pertaining the manna was as well. Verse 11, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Lamer, and God spoke to Moses saying, Shamaiti es tlunes b'nei Yisrael, I have heard the complaints of the Israelites, of the Jewish people. Dabir aleim, speak to them. Lamer, saying, Bein harbayim, at dusk, toichlu basar, you will eat meat. Uba boiker, and in the morning, tizbu lachem, you will eat bread to be satiated. V'yidaitem, and this way you will know, ki ani Hashem Elokeichem, that I am God, your God. Verse 13, Vayihi ba'erev, and it was in the evening. Vatal haslov, and the quail came up. Vatechasa samachane, and it covered the camp. Uba boiker, and in the morning, hoysa shichvas hatol saviv lamachane. There was a layer of dew around the camp. Rashi, haslov, what is slav? So Rashi explains that the word slav over here means min oif. It's a type of bird, v'shamin ma'oid, and very juicy, very fatty, which we call quail. Hoysa shichvas atol, the fact that it tells us that the dew was a layer around the camp. What does this mean? Shahatol sheikhev alamon. From it seems that what it tells us here is that the dew was resting and covering over the manna. And in another place it says, in the book of Numbers, uberedes hatol, and when the dew would come down, that the manna would come on top of it. So what would happen? So how does that work out? Was the dew below it, or was the dew on top of it? So therefore Rashi explains as follows. Hatal yered al aretz. First you would have one dew that would come down and cover the ground. V'hamon yered alav, and then the manna would cover it. And afterwards, v'choyzer v'yered tal alav, and then you would have another dew that would come and cover it. V'reu kemuna b'kufsa, and it would be like it's sitting in a box. That's one of the reasons why we have on Shabbos we have the tablecloth, which it covers the table. On it is the challah, and then on the challah we cover it again, is to remind us of how the dew and how the manna was covered. Dew on the bottom, dew on top, and the manna in the middle. So too the tablecloth and the covering over the challah, and the challah in the middle. Verse 14, Vatal shichvas atol, when the sun then rose and the layer of the dew evaporated, and behold, v'hine al pnei amidbar, and behold, over the surface of the desert, dak mechuspas, there was a thin substance, dak kakver, packed, like a thin crust, al haaretz, as fine as the frost on the ground. So after they peeled back, when you saw that the dew was no longer there, they were able to see this thin layer of a thin crust that was on the ground. Rashi explains as follows. Vatal shichvas atol kashachama zeirachas, when the sun was shining and therefore the dew was evaporated. Oila hatal shalamon likras achamos, so the dew that's on the manna came up towards the sun. And therefore, Rashi says, and over here it gives you a little bit of a scientific fact. You can see this clearly if you would take a hollow egg and you would let it sit, and you would let it sit with the dew, and then you would cover the front of it, and leave it in the sun. You will see that once the shallow egg, because it's very light and it's filled with dew, it will lift and will rise as the sun comes up. For Rabbi Seinu Dershu, because of the little hole that the dew went into it, and then you'll leave it in the sun, it will rise. For Rabbi Seinu Dershu, when the rabbis explained, Shatal Oilam in Haaretz, that the dew went up from the ground. So when the Torah tells us that when the sun as the dew came off the manna, it was revealed, the manna, and then they were able to see the manna that was there on the face of the desert. Dak. What does the word dak mean? Rashi says, dover dak, something very thin. Mechuspas, the word mechuspas, megula, means it was revealed. Ve'ein deimele b'mikra, we don't have any other similarity to this word in the verse. Yesh lefarish, and therefore one can explain the word mechuspas also from the terminology mechuspas, l'shen chafisa, u'deluksima, shemil mishnah. The Torah, the Mishnah talks about something called a chafisa and a luskama, which is a leather box or small little boxes which people use to keep items in them, like a jewelry box of some sort. And this is what another word mechuspas can mean as well. When the manna was revealed from the dew rising, they saw they saw there was a very thin layer of something underneath in the box, between these two layers of dew. And the Aramaic translation is mekalef, like something that's peeled. It peeled away the layer of the dew, and therefore they saw something there. Like you find this in previously when it talks about that Jacob, when he was peeling away the bark on the sticks, so you saw the white on the sticks as well. So you can say one word of this is that they peeled the manna away from it. Kakfir, what does the kfir mean? Kfir comes from the word glida, which is in Hebrew ice cream, but this is in French, reif gevarin, meaning something that was frozen, like a thin layer of ice or frost that was there. Dadak kigir, it was thin layer of frost that was there on the ground. Ka'avne gir v'hu min tseva shachar. Avne gir, the stones of a gir, which is a black stone, which is made of very little pebbles, and from it they make like a black tint, if you want to call it. Kedamrina, like it says, Gabe kisi adam hagir vazarnich. When it talks about the different types of dust where you're allowed to cover the blood from a animal that you need to cover, so there's different types of things that are mentioned, and one of them is gir, which is a very small black fine sand which they use many times for ink. Dada kigir geglida lara. The Aramaic translation uses something which is a small thin frost that was on the ground. It was a very, very thin black thing, but it looked and it was if it was something that was frozen on the ground. Al aretz on the ground. The Chaim Perushi sold too when you look at the explanation that the manna was so thin that it was lying on the ground like a carpet, if you want to call it, that it was all beautiful and even all along, and it looked like that these little seeds were connected all together like something that was, they were a little bit connected like one chunk, so it was easy for people to collect. Dak, very thin, shayimaklid gelid, it was dak mulmaila, that it was a very thin and smooth, that it would slide, and it was very thin on top. There is no other word in the pasuk that we can similarly translate and find a similarity to it. Verse 15. Vayiru b'nei Yisrael, and the Jewish people were afraid. They saw it, and they were exposed to the substance, and they're wondering what this is. Vayiru b'nei Yisrael, and the Jewish people saw it. Vayomeru, and they said, Ishalachiv, one to each other, Manhu, this is man. What does it mean, man? It is a portion of food, literally translate. Ki lo yadu mahu, they did not know exactly what it is to call it by its name. Vayomer Moshe aleim, and Moshe had to explain to them what this was. Hu alechem, this is the bread. Asher nasna Hashem lachem la'achla, that God has given you to eat. Manhu, the word man, hachanas mozen, prepared food it is. Kemoi, vayaman lam hamelach, like the king prepared them, gave them food every single day. Ki lo yadu mahu, they did not know what this food is, sheyikro, that they had a name b'shmei in its name. Verse 16. This is what God commanded that each person should collect according to what he needs. An omer of portion for what he needs. Each person according to what is head, according to the person in his household should take omer lagulgelas, a omer per head, a omer which is about 2.5 liters or quarts. Mispar nafsheseichem, according to the number of people. Isha shalot ba'olei tikachu, according to the amount of people that you have in your tent, you take an omer per person. Verse 16, Rashi. Oimer shemida, it's a type of measurement. Mispar nafshesechem kefim minyan nefashes lishbala, according to the amount of people that there were in each person's home. Oimer lechol guloi geilis, you would take a omer per head. Verse 17, Vayasu came b'nei Yisrael, so did the Jewish people. Vayilketu, and they gathered, Hamarbe v'hamamid, some gathered more and some gathered less. Rashi, Hamarbe v'hamamid, why does it say that if there was an omer, how was there more and how was there less? Yeshalach to harbev, yeshalach to mati, were those that collected a lot and those that collected a little. But when they came home, they measured it by the omer, ish mashalach, to each person according to what he collected. That the guy that tried to collecting more didn't get more. He got exactly a omer per person in his home. And the person that collected less also did not have less than an omer per person. This is one of the miracles that happened with the manna, that each person, no matter how much he gathered, he collected, whether he gathered more or less, when he came home, there was an omer per person in his home. Verse 18, but when they measured it by the omer, as we mentioned, miraculously, each person got an omer. And the one who gathered much had no excess. The one who gathered less was lacking nothing. Each person gathered according what they needed to eat. Verse 19, Moshe said to them, do not have any leftovers, do not leave any over it until the morning. Verse 20, however, there were those that did not listen to Moshe. And there were the people that left over. Who were those people, as we're soon going to see when it mentions Anoshim, it's referring to those same people that we mentioned in the beginning of the book of Exodus, Dasan and Aviram, who they left it over until the morning. Vayorum Teloim, and became full of maggots. Vayigash, and it became putrid, it smelled. Vayiktsef aleim Moshe became upset at them as well, became angry at them. Vayesiru Anoshim, Rashi, Dasan Vaviram, this is Dasan and Aviram that are called Anoshim in every case. But what is teloim? That it got maggots, worms. This is the terminology when something goes spoiled, it gets maggots in it. Vayivash, it became ruined and therefore began to smell. This is actually, the Torah says it the opposite way. First, actually, it started to smell and gave off a bad smell and became spoiled. Once it was spoiled, then it got full of maggots. This is the way usually things become spoiled. First, it's a gradual step. It starts to smell, it starts to spoil, and then it starts having maggots in it as well. Verse 21. And they collected each morning, every morning, each kifiyachle, every person according to what he needed to eat. And then when the sun grew hot, it would melt, and it would not be there, and it would become liquids. As we see over here, Rashi explains, it would then melt in the sun. Nishar basada, whatever is left in the field, nimoyach melted. V'nas and necholim, and from it became streams. V'sheisim imenu ayolum utzvayim, and the deer would come and drink from it. V'umis ha'elum tzadin nehem v'toimim tam shaman tam mon v'yoydim ha'shivchan shel Yisrael. These canals would then go in streams at different places, and even the nations of the world were able to taste it in their water. And then when they would taste the manna, they would understand and appreciate the greatness of the Jewish people. The word of venamus means pasher, not boiling water, not cold water, but lukewarm water, just lukewarm water that became hot because of the sun, and it would then melt away, and that's the way the water would continue to go down into different canals and streams away. Venamus, the word venamus means and melt. Dishtin fear, Dugmasi Sanhedrin, we find similar in the Tractate of Sanhedrin, where it talks about something which is a solid and melts into a liquid. Verse 22. And it was on the sixth day. And they collected a double portion of bread. What's a double portion? Which is 2 omer la'echad for every person. And all the leaders of the tribes came, and they told Moshe. Verse 22, Rashi, Liktu lecha Moshe, keshemadadu es likotasam be'oleim. When they started measuring how much they have in their tents, matzu kiflayim, they found that they had 2, double the amount, shnei yomer lechad. Umedrash Agada, the Medrash Agada explains, lechem mishuna. Instead of the word lechem mishna, which means double bread, they translates it to mean a weird kind of bread, a different kind of bread. That day on Friday, the manna was different in its taste and in its smell. If it's only coming to tell you that there was two, it already says the following word says that there were two omer for one. So why does it have to say that they had a double portion of bread? To tell you that the bread that was collected on Friday was different in taste and smell. They told Moshe, Shalu, they asked him, what's going on? Why is today different that we're getting two? From here we can learn that Moshe still has not yet taught them about the laws of Shabbos, which he was meant to tell them. Which we learned previously in verse 5 when God was telling the laws to Moses. Would be on the Friday. And they'll prepare until they asked, why do we have double? What's going on here? Oh, then he came along and told them, this is actually what God told me to tell you, that you're supposed to have double on Friday because you're not supposed to cook on Shabbos. Therefore, because Moshe delayed in telling them this, therefore later on in verse 28, when Moshe complains at Mosame Antem, ad oname Antem, until when are you going to complain that you're not going to follow the laws? And he did not take Moshe, did not exclude Moshe, meaning he says until when of the Jewish people, but he says me Antem, you complained. Meaning, why are you refused to follow the commandments? Because in this case, Moshe also delayed in telling the Jewish people the commandments. Now that the Jewish people asked, Moshe tells them the commandment pertaining Shabbos. Verse 23. And he says to them, Hu asher dibur Hashem, this is what God has spoken about. Shabbos Yisayin, Shabbos l'kodesh l'Hashem. It will be a day of rest, the holy Shabbos. Mochar, which is tomorrow, is asher teifu, efu, whatever you wish to bake today. Vis asher bashel, tevashlu bashelu, whenever you want to cook it today. Vis kol ha'oidef, and whatever's left over, whatever you want to set aside, as leftover, hanichol lechem, leave it on the side for safekeeping, l'mishmeres, for safekeeping, ad haboker, until the morning. That means whatever you want to set aside for yourself, leave it for safekeeping for the next day. Verse 23. Whatever you want to cook and bake in the oven. Bake today, for 2 days. And whatever you want to cook, the word cook is specifically in water, bake is specifically without water. Generally, baking works with bread, and cooking is about foods that you're making and cooking on the stove. Baking is in the oven. Lemishmeres, the word lemishmeres means ligniza, for safekeeping, so you shall have it for the next day. Verse 24. And they set it aside until the morning. Kasher tiva Moshe, like Moshe commanded. And it did not become putrid. And there were no maggots in it. Verse 25. And Moshe said to them, today you can eat it. The leftovers you can eat it today. Because today is Shabbos for God. Today you will not find any manna in the field. Rashi 25. Because every single morning they would go out and collect. So they came on the Shabbos morning to ask, should they go out and collect? Should we go out and collect? He told them, this is what you have left over. This is what you're supposed to eat. In the evening, and they came back to him and said, Shalom, should we eat it? He said, no, Shabbos hayim, it's the evening, and therefore you don't have to go out. He saw that they were concerned, okay, maybe that's it. We are done. We're not getting any more food. He said, today you won't find it any longer. Why does he say Hayoim? Hayoim, today you won't find it. Today you won't find it. Tomorrow it'll be, and the manna is going to continue to fall. And don't you worry. Verse 26, therefore he explains to them that 6 days a week you would collect it. You're going to gather. On the seventh day, Shabbos, it's Shabbos, there will not be any manna, you will not go out and collect. V'yom hashvi Shabbos, Shabbos hu, it's Shabbos, and therefore Hamon liyabay, there won't be any man. V'leiba akasav el Rabbi Shem Kippur Yom Tovim. Why does the Torah say it again? This comes to include that also on Yom Kippur and on the holidays as well, no manna fell. And it was on the seventh day. So there were people that went out to collect, but they found nothing. Verse 28, God said to Moses, how long will you all refuse to observe my commandments and my teachings? Why did he say this? Because some people neglected to keep the commandments. As we'll see, Rashi explains. Mishal hedyetu. This is a terminology that people use, a very frequent language that people say. Bahade hutza loki kiraba. Together with the thorns, you also take out the cabbage. Meaning, when you come to take out the thorns, you're also sometimes taking out the good stuff with it as well. When you're taking out some weeds, sometimes you're getting out the flowers as well. Meaning, in this case, because the evil people do something wrong, so too the good ones get reprimanded for it as well. Meaning, even though there were only a few people that went out to collect on Shabbos, however, Hashem reprimands all of them, even though it was only a few of the bad that did something wrong. Verse 29. Look at this wonderful, unbelievable miracle that God has given you the Shabbos. Therefore, see the miracle that God gives you on Friday, a double portion of bread. Each person should stay where they are. No one should leave his place. On the seventh day. Verse 29. Look that God gave you the Shabbos, and you can see it clearly with your eyes, that God is warning you about the observance of Shabbos. God is making a miraculous event that you can all see every eve of Shabbos. That He's giving you bread for 2 days, that you should not go out and collect. From this words we learn, from here we learn from this verse that the amount of area of space that a person's allowed to go once he leaves the Tchum Shabbos. The Tchum Shabbos is the 2,000 amas that one is not allowed to, which is about a little bit over a half a mile, that one is not allowed to leave city limits on Shabbos. Once you leave that area, you have the 4 amas, the 4 handbreadths around your area, which you're allowed to roam in. Legufay, why is it 4? 3 amos for your body. Usually the average height or size of a person is 3 amos. The echad lepishut yadayim reglaim, and one that you can stretch. This gives the person the ability that he has to move around in those 4 amos. Al yetiyishmim kaimei elu al payim amo. This is, one should not leave a space. Meaning these are the 2,000 amos of Tchum Shabbos, which are measured outside city limits to all 4 ways. Leikim afudah shein tchumen elam divrei seifrim. Not how some want to explain. It's not clearly stated about the prohibition of the tchum, of leaving that area. The actual prohibition of not leaving your area and city limits of those 2,000 amas is actually a rabbinic commandment. But it's based, and we have a reliance on a verse, by the very fact that the Torah says it, about the people that were collecting the manna. So it's not a biblical commandment per se. It is a rabbinic commandment that relies on a verse for its authenticity and veracity. Verse 30. And the people rested on the 7th day. Verse 31. Vayikru b'nei Beis Yisrael, and once the Jewish people have seen that this is something that is going to be common and it's falling, the Jewish people called this, they gave it a name, manna. What was this man? V'hu kizera gad lavan. It was like a coriander seed, but it was lavan, it was white. V'tamay ketzapiches b'dvash, and it tasted like pastry fried in honey. Rashi, v'hu kizera gad lavan, esev sheshboi. It was part of like a herb, that it has the name, and Rashi gives it, as we know the English word as well, as colandry. V'zera shalei ogul ve'ina lavan. Its seed, that comes out from this grass, is round but not white. V'amon hayalavan. But the manna was white, and therefore the Torah has to add, but it was white, because usually a colander seed is black. It's a different color. So therefore he tells you, the only way that it's compared to it is wants to show that it was round, like a bowl. This is what there was, these round things. It was not like that plant, because hulavin it was white. Kitzapichis, what does it mean was like a pastry? Batzek, like you take like a dough, you fry it in oil, and they would call it eskeritim b'lashem mishnah, about a pastry that was fried in oil. Verse 32. Vayomer Moshe, and Moshe said to them, this is what God commanded. Meloi ha'omer mimenu, an omer full of it, you should take from it. Lemishmeres, you should keep it for safekeeping. L'deiresechem, for future generations. Leman yiru es alechem, so they should be able to see the bread. Asher echalti eschem amidbar, that I fed you in the desert. Vayitzi eschem and it's Mitzrayim, when I took you out of Egypt. Lemishmeres, what's this safekeeping? Ligniza, you'll put it away for safekeeping. L'deiresechem, for future generations. When did the God have to show it to the Jewish people? As we mentioned a few days ago, Yirmiyah, in the time of Yirmiyah, when Yirmiyah was rebuking the Jewish people, and it said, why aren't you studying Torah? And the Jewish people would respond, you want us to stop working and go study Torah all day? Where are we going to get money from? That's when he took out that little bit of manna that was hid away from the time of Moses. And he said, look at this generation, see at the people in the desert. He doesn't say hear what God said, but he uses a terminology, look, because he showed them that little bit of manna. This is the way the Jewish people survived in the desert. God has many different messengers. To those that follow and study Torah, God will send you what you need. You need to follow what God tells you. When you study Torah, God will already take care and give you everything you need. Verse 34. And Moshe said to Aaron, take one urn, an earthenware of urn, one urn of earthenware. And in this earthenware urn, put in it a omer full of manna, of mun. V'hanach oisei, and place it l'fnei Hashem, in front of God. L'mishmeres l'deresechem, for safekeeping for future generations. What is tzinsenes? Tzloichis, a type of urn. Shalcheres, of earthenware, as the Targum translates. When you should put it before God. What does it mean before God? In front of the ark, where there would be the two tablets as well. Though that the Torah is telling us about something that hasn't yet happened, because the ark hasn't been made, the temple hasn't been built, the Jewish people haven't received the Ten Commandments. This verse actually came later on. Once the ark was built, that's where they placed this urn of the manna. Why does it say now? It tells us now because since we're talking about the manna, but really it's referencing to later, when the Jewish people actually did it. Verse 34, God commanded Moshe, and Aaron put it before the ark of testimony for safekeeping. Verse 35, and the Jewish people ate this manna for 40 years, until they came to an inhabited land. They ate the manna until they came to the edge of Canaan. Rashi, Arboim Shana. Why does it tell us 40 years? Because technically missing 30 days, because of the first 30 days they still had the provisions that they had when they came out of Mitzrayim, from Egypt. Because on the 15th of Iyar, Yared Lamaman Chila, was the first time the manna came down. And on the 15th of Nisan, 40 years later, is when it stopped. As it says, it comes to tell us that these cakes, these cookies that the Jewish people, the matzahs that they took out of Egypt, also tasted like the manna, and therefore those 30 days make it a complete 40 years. Al Eretz Nesheves, what does it mean to inhabited land? After they came into the Jordan, after they crossed over the Jordan River. Because this land that was on the other side of the Jordan was more important and better than that. The land of Canaan was more important, was just as important and even better than the land on the other side of the Jordan. Shenemar, because Moshe prays to God and asks, "Can I please go and see the land that's on the other side of the Jordan?" Because Moshe knows what was on this side of the Jordan because he was there. And he's asking God, "I want to see something better." Meaning, the word Nesheves means settled, inhabited. But Moshe knew that the other side is better, and therefore he asks of God to go to the other side. Al Ktei Eretz Canaan, on the edge of Canaan, B'tchilas HaGvul, at the beginning of the borders, Koidem Shavar Seyardim, before they even crossed the Jordan, V'hu Arvis Moav, this is what we call the plains of Moab, Nimtzu B'chishim Zeh Zeh, seemingly it looks like that there is a contradiction in the two verses, because from one verse it says until they came to inhabited land. And then later on in the verse it says until the edge of Moab, even before they crossed the Jordan. So when did it happen? Did they eat the manna even after they crossed the Jordan, or it stopped already on the other side of the Jordan before they crossed? So which one is it? Ela ba'arvis Moav, at the plains of Moab before they crossed the Jordan. Kishemes Moshe, when Moshe died. B'zayim ba'adar, that's on the 7th of Adar. Pasuk Amon later, that's when the man stopped falling. V'nistapku. However, they continue to enjoy it. They still had from it. Miman shalaktu be'bayim, from that month, achikrivu Omer b'shishas b'Nisan, until they brought the Omer sacrifice, the 16th of Nisan, over a month later, which was now already in the new side, across the Jordan. That they ate from the grain of the land of Israel once the day after Pesach. So what we see over here is, until they came to the inhabited land, they ate from the man, but the man stopped falling already at the edge of the Jordan River in the plains of Moab when Moshe died. That explains the two verses which seemingly are contradictory. They're not contradictory, ones when it stopped falling and ones when they stopped eating it. Verse 36, the ha'omer and the omer. What size is a omer? What measurement is that? Asiris ha'efahu is a tenth of an ephah. Rashi, shalish sin, ha'efa shalish sin, an ephah is 3 sa. Sa vav kabim, a sa is then 6 kabim. A kav, is giving you the breakdown, is 4 lugin. So that means in every ephah you have 72 lugin. A lug, vav beitzim, is 6 eggs, the size of 6 eggs, which gives you then an ephah, makes it 432. Nimtz is asayos ephah. So if you want to do the math now, a tenth of an ephah is mem gimel beyim v'chomish beya, is 43 and a fifth. 43.2 would give you a tenth of 432 eggs that go to an ephah, and that's your breakdown. Hushir l'chala, this is also the same shear for when one has to separate challah from making dough, is 43 beitzim, which is 43 eggs, which is about, every bay is roughly about 2.5 ounces. And so if you do the math, that gives you the ability of how much it was, 43.2 of those beitzim. It's 43.2, so it's about 86, a little more, or 86.4 ounces would be the amount of man that a omer was. This concludes the Torah reading for the 6th day of Parshas Beshalach.